So there's a high chance of Donald Trump coming back. I kind of give it 80 to 90%. And the world needs to be ready for a second Trump presidency. And this time he's smarter and he kind of knows his way around the swamp. There's going to be a ton of shakeups over the next 4 years. And it's important to realize that new America is going to be more protectionist than ever. Trump is going to break apart the globalization agenda, and there will be winners and losers, and the biggest bag holder is going to be Europe. In his recent interview, Trump gave away his game plan for the next 4 years. Some of it makes sense, but other policies simply don't. But one thing is crystal clear, and the future of the EU and the US is going to be purely transactional. It's going to be pay to play. When asked about the EU, Trump's very angry. They don't take our cars. We take their cars by the millions. They don't take our farm products. We take their farm products. We have a trade deficit with them of over $200 billion. If Trump gets in, Europe's economy is going to be finished. He wants to make more stuff in the US and get the Europeans to buy more US made products. And because China is still the big boogeyman, the EU will have no choice. And this is the danger of blindly following US foreign policy. Von der Leyen and friends, they jumped on Biden's plan to decouple from Russia and China. And in the process, the EU destroyed their own economies. And now that Trump is coming back, US support for Europe is gonna evaporate and they will be left with absolutely nothing. Trump also mentioned his conversation with Merkel. He asked how many US cars were in Germany, how many Fords or Chevrolets are in Munich. He made it a fact to say zero and how a ton of Mercedes and Volkswagens are in the US. And this new US economic policy is going to change that. And I don't think Europe is ready for this dramatic shift.
The Europeans are not carrying their fair share of the burden, especially when it comes in provision of weapons and they're deindustrializing their own country at the same time that they say that Putin must be defeated at all costs. If Putin must be defeated at all costs, to our German friends, then stop deindustrializing your own country in the name of a ridiculous green energy policy. But I actually think that Washington, at least current Washington leadership, really likes the fact that the Europeans are completely dependent on us. That's not an alliance. These people aren't increasingly allies. They are client states of the United States of America who do whatever we want them to do.
A Trump presidency means America first. It doesn't mean the G7 or NATO first. It means focus will be brought back to the US. And as a result, EU industries are going to get completely decimated further. As JD Vance said, Europe has deindustrialized itself over the past 2 years. In 2023, big German companies started moving out of Germany, and a ton of them went to the US. Volkswagen and Mercedes invested nearly $4 billion into US factories, creating around 6,000 jobs, and this is one example of Europe's industrial base getting hollowed out to other countries. Industries, they're moving to China for the huge market and supply chains, but they're also moving to the US because of big subsidies. Europe has neither, so the big manufacturers are leaving home. During the RNC, Trump dropped an economic bombshell. It's a curveball that's absolutely horrible for the EU economy. Trump now wants Chinese automakers back to build cars in the US, and this is a complete 180 from Biden's policies and is something that will deindustrialize Europe even further. When a Chinese company decides where to build their plants, they have to take in several factors: the cost of production, the geopolitical risks, and most importantly, the size of the market. Trump wants Chinese automakers to build plants in America to create jobs in the domestic economy and, of course, to learn from Chinese technology. And whether this comes to pass really depends on China. There's a lot of contradictory things that he just said as well. He wants to abolish the EV subsidies, and this makes it kind of weird for EV companies like BYD to really build plants in the US. Now, I don't think the Chinese will take the bait, but it does show the new America wants to move manufacturing back home. He's going to hit the whole world with blanket tariffs. Trump's going to impose a 10% across the board tax on all foreign imports. So any product shipped from Europe into the US will face a bigger tax. It's not as crazy as the tariff on China, which can hit 100%, but it is still significant. It is still painful for the EU. Because they are decoupling from China, the EU has to sell more stuff to the US, and now a significant tariff is going to hit them. And this will entice even more companies in Germany or France to move their factories all the way to the US. Dodging the tariff might be incentive enough to abandon Berlin for a plant somewhere in Texas or Tennessee. Europe will be forced to deindustrialize even further, and considering their obsession with green energy and Russia, there's simply no way for their industries to recover. We should also remember that Trump is very erratic when it comes to China. We could actually see tariffs on Beijing come down because they simply don't work. Even after the initial tariffs in 2018, Chinese exports to the US didn't really collapse. After the lockdowns, it went up, hitting nearly $60 billion a month last year. All this could be just election rhetoric, so we'll just have to wait and see. We kind of remember that Trump's a businessman, so hopefully he can cut a deal with Beijing. But what's not ambiguous is his disdain for Project Ukraine. Trump wants to pull back from the military industrial complex, and Europe is now in very big trouble.
I think Zelensky is maybe the greatest salesman of any politician that's ever lived. Every time he comes to our country, he walks away with $60 billion. But he's the greatest salesman of all time. He walks in. So now here's the beauty. He just left 4 days ago with $60 billion, and he gets home and he announces that he needs another $60 billion, else it never ends. It never ends.
Does this seem like Trump's going to keep bankrolling Ukraine? In fact, he's going to make Europe pay through the nose for their own defense, and the bill will be staggering. All of Europe, especially the biggest economies, will have to cough out tens of billions of dollars a year to meet the target. Back in 2018, Trump said that NATO should double their defense spending to 4% of GDP. But is that even possible for them? The budget deficits for EU countries are growing fast. By 2030, Germany will hit 3.4%, France at nearly 4%, and Italy at 6%. If Trump abandons NATO or forces a higher payment, the EU will face a bigger financial crisis down the road. Defense could be the single biggest line item in Germany. And where will the money come from? It will be borrowed into existence at higher interest rates. So Europe is effectively trapped. They have to suddenly ramp up defense spending when their industries are crumbling. The industrial base is in tatters. Either they buy US weapons to make up for the shortfall, or they build their own weapons using more expensive energy and they spend more. During the interview, Trump also mentioned critical points about Taiwan, and once again, it centers around paying them protection money to the US. Trump's extremely lukewarm about defending Taiwan, and it's going to be a pay-to-play arrangement. Just listen to this. They did take 100% of our chips business. Taiwan should pay us for defense. Taiwan is 9,500 miles away from us. It's only 68 miles away from China. China could just bombard it. It's very clear that this will be a transactional relationship. Trump is treating the US military as an insurance policy, and his mission today is to go around collecting those payments from Europe and Taiwan. Going forward, there will be two big shifts we must pay attention to, and this is bad for inflation and the global debt crisis. Firstly, a global rearmament is coming. Europe will have to build their own defense at any cost. They won't make peace with Russia, so the EU can't access cheap gas from Siberia. Von der Leyen, of course, is calling for Europe to build their own European Defense Union. She wants to create a single market for defense, which means weapons for Europe will be sourced in-house. Considering the state of EU manufacturing, they will have to spend $3 to get a dollar of output. The fundamental problem of expensive energy hasn't been solved yet. Either the EU abandons their green policies and they fire up all the nuclear plants, or they make peace with Russia, and if not, the defense bill will be extremely big. Another important issue we must talk about is Trump's plan to bring manufacturing back home. And to do this, you need to weaken your currency, and he kinda knows it. During the interview, he admitted that a strong dollar and a weak yen dynamic are hurting US exports. Because of the weaker yen, exports from Japan will be cheaper. People around the world will import their products more. Trump weakening the dollar will have big implications. Firstly, it will most likely drive up local inflation in the US. At least in the short term, things in Walmart are still imported. If all you're holding are paper dollars, you'll be screwed. But he probably doesn't have a choice in the matter. Since 2011, the US dollar has been strengthening, and this wasn't good for US exports. There's a reason why the US devalued the dollar massively back in 1985 using the Plaza Accord. It was because Japan was destroying US industries, so Reagan had to crush the dollar's value to make US products competitive again. So if Trump wants to revive US manufacturing, he will need to depreciate the USD. There's no other alternative. And this complicates things. There's no free lunch here, only trade-offs. Devaluing the dollar is easy. There are multiple ways to do it. And the easiest is to slam interest rates down massively, which he is supporting it. You make US treasuries less attractive so money flows out of US dollar assets. He could also get Japan to strengthen their currency by intentionally dumping more US bonds and dollars. And this will bring the dollar down as well. But let's remember this will lead to higher inflation. Trump wants tariffs, he wants lower interest rates, a weaker dollar, and fiscal expansion. And all this can be achieved, but the price to pay will be more inflation. Whether it's Biden, whether it's Trump, the US is really stuck in an endless inflation loop. The money supply will continue to expand further and further. There's no escaping this. And this means the debt bubble will continue to grow and asset prices will continue to rocket up in the years ahead. Not just in the US but across the world, especially in Europe as well. So it's quite premature to say if Trump's policies are good or bad, but as always, let me know what you think. Will Trump pull support away from Europe? And will he devalue the dollar to bring manufacturing back? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.